And I'm going to try to talk slow as well. I'm Tom Martinek. I'm over at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. I'm a professor here. And I want to talk about a program that I have been running for several years. Sylvie alluded to it in her early presentation. And I want to talk to you a little bit about it, how it evolved, what we're doing, talk a little bit about some of the research that has come out of that program. But in doing that,
Would you rather have me do that?
it's fine. I think I can do it. I think I'll keep me active up here. You guys have seen this picture several times here, and all of my work right now and the program that I'm about to describe to you is really coming out of Don Hellison, who is the heart and soul of what we do here, and his model has been the centerpiece for our programming and working with youth in all different ways. And I was thinking also, Sierra, when you're talking about the theoretical underpinnings of the TPSR model, I thought about it, at this point, I can't help but think that Don's TPSR model came out of his idea. He always calls it as an idea, but it really is a theory in many ways. I mean, we have embraced it, we have used it, and we have been guided by it. And like all theories, we borrow from theories to do what we do. And I sometimes think we don't give Don enough credit that he has created unintentionally a theoretical model that we're working from. So I just think that's so important for us to think about. It's a great framework for working with kids and to help kids. We all want to do this in a way that we're trying to help kids become personally and socially responsible. Or I always borrow from Robert Coles. We're trying to help kids become good people. And that's essentially where we're headed with this. So one way that I have done this is working at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. And as a professor in teacher education, became interested in working with kids through my own work, and I'm going to talk to you about a leadership program that I have been running for several years with high school kids. And the leadership program, as I say, has a centerpiece. It's put together through different types of experiences that I have had, and also from my own research in working with different aspects of teaching and coaching. But I want to talk about leadership, and I'm going to draw on three different assumptions in this leadership model. And one of the assumptions is that there's a belief in myself, and I think people who work with youth, is that all kids have the possibility to lead, to be a leader in some way. And my point is, you need the opportunity provided to these kids to be able to lead in some way. And a lot of the kids that I've worked with throughout the years probably are in a situation or in a school where they don't see a lot of those opportunities, if any opportunities, to lead. And so it is a far reach for them to think about themselves as being leaders. So by providing a program, an after-school program that I'm going to talk about, what I'm trying to do is unveil the idea of there's always ways in which you can lead and help others in some way, and that is focusing on that fourth level of Hellison's model. So that's one assumption I'm operating on, is that all kids have the possibility to be a leader. So that's the first thing. Second thing, also I think it will require guidance, and it requires some kind of help to become a leader, to have somebody who can be there to guide them in making the right decisions that will help elevate their perception about how they can help others in some way. So I don't think it just happens. I think you have to have a conscientious and intention to really develop leaders in a purposeful way. So that's an important assumption that I've been operating on, is that I have the responsibility to help in terms of getting kids to be leaders in some way. And the last part is based on my previous research, is that you have to have also come across with an expectation that kids can do it. And so if you don't have that expectations, kids are not going to get to the level that you want them to. And there's the old theory, you get what you expect. And my research that I've worked on for 15 years was drawn upon expectation theory, borrowing from Rosenthal's work, Carol Dweck's work, John Nichols' work, all of that stuff that looked at how we create a climate, a learning climate where kids can feel that they can become control of their own lives and also can contribute in a positive way and really realize what kinds of things they can contribute to others. So, expectations are powerful, probably the most powerful element I think that we do in our work is where we come in with an expectation that kids will rise to what you want them to be. So, 3 basic assumptions that are operating here in my program. My leadership program, the Youth Leader Corps, I'm going to talk a little bit about the genesis of where it started from. And this program started way back in 1993. This was a program that started as an after-school program for a elementary school in Greensboro, North Carolina. It was for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. So we began to work with little ones there, the 3rd graders. And the idea was to provide an opportunity for kids at this school who needed some guidance. According to the principal that was working at that school, who wanted me to run this program for her, is that these kids, she felt, were going to fall through the cracks eventually. And this school, where this program was going to be operating at, was located in what they call a public housing area. Public housing, I don't know what they call it here, but it's an area in which homes are subsidized to people who, families that can't afford a regular housing mortgage in any way. So they get public assistance in their housing. So anyway, these kids came from this particular housing area. They went to the school, which was right by the housing area. And so these were kids who were typically a lot at risk with a lot of the problems that are associated with poverty and so on. But she felt that this particular group of kids really needed something to help them, guide them to be able to be successful just in the school. So what we did was we started this after-school program. It was called Project Effort. And Project Effort was a program that was going to be providing physical activity for kids that were built around Don Hellison's TPSR model. And it was a program that originally was going to be at the school, but the principal said, no, I want to get these kids out of the neighborhood, out of the school. Can you bring them to the university campus? So that's what we did. We brought the kids from the school, brought them to the campus, and we ran this program on the University of North Carolina Greensboro campus. So we did this for several years with that particular group of kids. We stayed with those kids, and eventually we developed a middle school program. And the middle school program was basically to stay with those kids as long as we could. And a middle school is like a junior high school. I'm not sure what that would be called here. Leo, I don't know. Do they have like a junior high school here or something like that?
First years of high school.
Yeah, so you're talking about like 11, 12-year-old kids. So you have an elementary and then you have a middle school age group. And it's just elementary goes on up to about 11, 10, 11 years old, and then they go to another 2-year school called a middle school. So anyway, we wanted to stay with those kids in the middle school, so we continued on with the after-school program. And then eventually some of these kids were going to go to, going to the high school, and what we wanted to do was to provide an opportunity for them to lead, to run a program like they had in Project Effort during their high school career. So what was born out of that was the Youth Leader Corps. And so we had veteran sport participants who were involved in Project Effort program now at a high school program, running a program, planning a program for other kids in the community. So that's that's kind of the evolution of the Youth Leader Corps program. It basically was to take kids who were taking these particular experiences in TPSR, getting them set position to be able to lead later on in their high school years, and to have them now responsible for delivering a values-based program based on TPSR. So that's how that started. Now, eventually, as we were working with the high school kids, as I was working with them, we had about, probably 16 high school kids that we worked with. And these kids would basically come from school, plan a lesson for kids that were coming in from different parts of the community to work with. These are young kids. And it was just, I thought it was just one of my favorite parts of the program, was the fact to see these high school kids step up and be able to really plan a values-based program, trying to instill kind of the sense of TPSR into the lives of these other kids. And then the kids would go back to their high school. The problem is when they go back to the high school that they would struggle after high school. Their high school was just not a good fit for them. And so a lot of the kids would either go to the school and cause problems. Sometimes they wouldn't go to school. Sometimes they go to school and just not do anything. So it was just not a good fit, and that was really, it was problematic for me. So my thought was to start another school, an alternative school. So that's where I was headed. So anyway, I said, I'm gonna start this alternative school, and it's gonna be smaller class sizes. We're gonna kind of really get these kids back on some solid footing. And so I looked at different ways in which we could do this. And there was different options. We have what we call a charter school program, which is a state-funded program where you can develop your own school, but you have to get teachers, and you gotta get a principal, you gotta get space, you gotta get money, and I didn't wanna do that. So if I did that, I'd have to quit being a professor. So I wasn't about to stop that. Then there was a model that came from one of our superintendent's ideas, and that was what they call a middle college. And the middle college is an alternative high school model. It's a dropout prevention model. And the basic idea of that model is that it provides an educational experience with small class sizes on a university setting. So you could put it on a college setting. Pretty good deal. Therefore, you have resources from the university to help support that school. And it is also run by the public schools. So they pay for the principal, they pay for school busing, bus the kids there, they pay for the teachers, everything is taken care of. So that seemed to work. That was what I was gonna do. So that's what we did. We started the middle college on UNCG's campus in August of 2011. And so what that did was it provided an opportunity for the kids that some of the high school kids that I've been working with to go to this school. And it also created another source for me for my youth leader corps to draw kids from that alternative high school to be youth leaders in the youth leader corps. So that's what I did, 2011. So in doing that, we selected students from the middle college to be part of the youth leader corps. These are kids who volunteered for the program. We interviewed the kids to make sure they knew what it was all about. And we also asked the principal and the counselors to just kind of give us an idea of some of the kids that would be probably most, and an advantage to take this particular, or have this particular experience. So we ended up having this group of middle college students now, high school students, being part of the Youth Leader Corps, running, providing an after-school program to other kids in the community. So that's how that all evolved.
See if I can I reverse that?
Yep.
Thank you. So to do that, to have that program be effective and to make sure that the youth leaders were up to snuff, I guess, in terms of TPSR and understanding the program, we required an orientation meeting, and the orientation was basically to get them ready to be able to run this after-school program. The orientation meeting included several things. One was that we talked about, at the beginning of the meeting, it was a week-long meeting, we met each day. We would talk about commitment, first of all, and that was really important to get the high school kids to understand what their role was and to be committed to the program, because we couldn't have the kids come and then decide not to come. So they had to understand the scope of the program, what it meant, and to make sure that it was something that they could stay with. So commitment was a big, big message that we gave them at the beginning of the year. The second thing is we talked about TPSR and what the model was all about. Obviously, they have to know about it. And so we talked about what the model was, what are some of the core values of it, what are some of the strategies that help deliver the values through physical activity. We went through all of that. And it's to make sure that they understood exactly what that particular framework was and also what the particular mission of that program was supposed to be. It wasn't just giving kids activities, but to be able to deliver TPSR to other kids that were coming in to work with them. So, TPSR and strategies. To do that, we also provided opportunities for them to try it out, working with the kids. So we did some peer teaching, and during that orientation, we gave feedback to them, how they did, what were some things they had to do in terms of just some pedagogical things, getting kids organized, but also in terms of just understanding how you could emphasize the particular TPSR values, both in the activity and then also during what we call personal reflection, which was the last thing that we worked on. And reflection was important. Two types of reflections that we talked about. One was personal reflection, how they could reflect on their own teaching, and that process was a really important part of their experience here. And we had them do their own self-reflection two ways. One was that we would have or group discussions after each session, but also we would have written reflections. And those written reflections were done on a lesson plan format. It asked for three things. One was, after the experience that they had, what were ways in which they contributed to that experience? Second thing was, what kinds of leadership qualities did they show in that particular experience? And the third thing, what were the challenges that were there? And what were you going to do to address those challenges? So those are three aspects, three focal points that we had during reflection. We went over that in orientation. This was a thing that they had to know that was going to be part of the experience. The other part was also how they would run reflection with the kids and what kinds of questions they could ask kids, because that was a really important part of the TPSR experience, as I think many of you kind of talked about so far in terms of the program, that part of reflection with the kids, talking about how they were responsible during the experience, what kinds of things did they gain from it, and just to basically be able to kind of bring out the experience a little bit more effectively through a reflection session with the young kids. So reflection was a big, big part of it, and we spent some time on that during the orientation meeting. So those are three basic aspects in which we try to get kids positioned to be ready to go and to be able to run the program. some of the strategies that we emphasize. We talked about different types of leadership strategies, and these are strategies that have been, I think, covered by you, Sylvie, I think at the beginning. And some of these were dealing with different types of things that we're looking at. One was the whole idea of how you model good behavior. We wanted the leaders to be able to model good behavior, to be able to have the kids that they're working with understand that, you know, if you're going to be responsible, I'm going to have to be responsible. So they're going to be able to reflect different types of responsibility behaviors, which would be just being ready with the kids, being interactive with the kids, being fair with the kids, being sensitive to their particular needs, all of that stuff. And also in terms of how they interacted with each other, the leaders in terms of, as they're working together, making sure that they interact in a positive way so that they're always modeling these important behaviors. So modeling was one. The other one was setting expectations for the kids. Those are obviously really important things for leadership in many ways, but just to set expectations that are realistic and positive for the kids, and so that you are able to communicate that in a way just in terms of not just orally, but also in terms of the types of activities that you create for them. And the other one was also opportunities for success, and also in terms of how you promote positive behaviors and positive relationships with the kids. So critical. One way we did that, we required all the leaders to be able to meet the kids at the door and to interact with them before the clubs would even start. And that's an important part of it. They could play with them. We have about a 5-minute period before we started the program. Okay, as we're looking at this, we also had, I had what they call 4 Bs that we also ended up with in terms of the orientation meeting and reminding the kids at the end of each session is always, one of the things I wanted them to take away was the idea of being ready when the kids come in, always being enthusiastic, being with it, what we call with itness, being able to watch what the kids are doing, responding in some way. I always talked about the leaders looking for what we call teachable moments during the experiences, but just really being observant, not just doing the activity to do it, but to watch what's going on. And then also, obviously, be a role model. Those 4 Bs, those kids knew that by heart all the way through, and we always always made sure they were mindful of those before and also at the end of each session. Routine, I think you're all familiar with that. Just to go over, relational part was part of the program, looking at the idea of relationships being a big part of that, having kids, the leaders meet the kids at the door, being relational with them, having a large group meeting. We would sit in a big circle at the beginning. I would talk to them a little bit. Sometimes I had the leaders do it just to go over the rules. Then they would break up into small groups. They would teach for maybe 8 or 9 minutes, and then we would rotate. So they would rotate around with the 8 or 9 kids. So leaders would have a chance to teach a couple times, several times. And that helped in terms of kind of working out some kinks that they would have, but also it exposed them to all of the kids in different ways. And then also at the end, we would meet together as a large group. We'd talk about the general session, and then the kids would leave. I would meet with the leaders, debrief, give them time to plan their lesson for next week, and then we go off to eat. So that's basic format of our program, but it was a format we always followed, and it was, every part of that program was important. It served a certain purpose for the experience of these leaders. Let me just talk briefly about the research, and then we're going to finish up. Sylvie? I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done with the kids and the research that has taken place. This is just some that I've pulled out, but I think it's important just to understand some of the things that we've looked at. One is program engagement and commitment. and what we mean by commitment. Tammy Schilling did an early study that looked at what were reasons why kids stayed with the program. Our leaders kept with it. What was their reason for commitment to the program? What were some things that affected it? How did they look at things that were important in terms of their ability to stay with that program over the long haul? Most of it, I can tell you from the study that you had, was the relational part of it, the relationships between the staff and then also among themselves was a big factor. And the other factor, significant factor, was the importance of having a leading role. That was something that they felt really was important to them. So those are two big predictors of that. Second study that we did also was Martinek, Hellison, and Schilling. We did a study on the stages of leadership. How do kids progress in terms of the different stages of leadership during the course of the year? And we looked at the stages in terms of personal needs, why kids come in for personal reasons, for social reasons, to be able to come in just to have some time to recreate. Sometimes these are some of the personal aspects why they became a leader or stayed with the leadership experience. Second stage that we looked at is in terms of pedagogy. They became more interested in pedagogy at that second one. They were concerned about how they could be effective in delivery of these lessons. Eventually, the fourth stage, we kind of look at that as kids who now look at themselves as true leaders. They see themselves in a true leadership role. And eventually that fourth stage was something that we looked at in terms of trying to get the kids to not only just be a leader, but to be compassionate for kids, to really have an empathy for what kids are bringing in with them and how they can be compassionate with the kids and also teaching compassionate behavior for the other kids. And then the last one is development of relationships. Relationships are really important, and Michael Hemphill and I are looking at, this is a study that we put together. We're trying to get this off, but it's a study that has looked at how relationship can be fostered through a special intervention, using a special system where we video kids and giving them feedback for that in terms of how they are looking at in terms of their relationship with the individual kids. So those are 4 points of research. The research is kind of, I think, a collective portrayal of what we're trying to do. What it means is that it really, I think, emphasizes the whole importance of relationship. The second thing, I think, also is the importance of giving kids opportunity to rise to an expectation that I mentioned earlier. And the last thing is also transfer is a big issue. And what we're hoping is that we can kind of get a handle on transfer later on down the road. The idea of how transfer, the experiences that they have, they take from that leadership program and able to apply that in later life. Melendez and Anthony Melendez, who was a student of mine, we worked on that whole idea of leadership transfer, and that was something they looked at in terms of leaders that have been in the program for 4 or 5 years. Now we're out, 2 or 3's out of the program, and looking at how that particular experience affected them in their daily lives. And again, relationship came up. It helped leaders thought that the relationship part was an important part of the experience, and also the idea of forming certain goals in their lives, to be able to have some purpose in their lives. And they kind of tied that back to the Youth Leader Corps program. That's an important aspect I think we need to all look at, and the idea of transfer. I don't think we know that much about transfer. I think we talk about it, but we're not clear on what that all means. What is transfer? And it could be something immediately after a program, it could be something down the line. But I think that's something we constantly bring up, and that to me is an important element that I think we need to really kind of get a handle on and be able to effectively evaluate that. And that certainly is something that's borne out in Hellison's model, the 5th stage. So that's our Youth Leader Corps program. It's just finished its 25th year, as Sylvia had mentioned it, and I think it's one of the highlights of my professorial work at UNCG, and it always reminds me, you know, how kids can rise to the occasion. I always hope that they can walk away with the idea that they can be contributors to their community, to their home, and, you know, maybe the world in some way. Okay, so